Thinking Out Loud with Dave Palmer. Here on Morning Joy, where truth matters.
Welcome back to Morning Joy, where truth matters. I'm your host, Keith Downey, and what was St. Thomas Aquinas' political philosophy? Well, we're going to talk all about that with Dave Palmer. Good morning, Dave.
Good morning, Keith. Good to be with you again.
Yeah, happy
Why
election.
are we talking about this today, of all days, huh?
I know. I'm not sure. Good question. I just randomly threw on an American flag T-shirt, and yeah.
Yeah. Well, I figured this was a timely topic. You know, it's on everybody's mind, and Debbie and Adam were talking about it as well. And it's interesting because St. Thomas Aquinas lived less than 50 years, and he wrote on everything, and he didn't write a lot on politics. I mean, considering the breadth of what he wrote about, but like in the Summa Theologia, there's not a whole section just on politics, but there are parts of it that you can kind of read between the lines and kind of figure out what he's getting at. But he did write a little book called De Regno, which translates into On Kingship, where he talked about the best form of government, in his opinion. And even though, of course, we live in a democratic republic, he is going to advocate for monarchy. But I think as I explained a few of the things that he writes about, I think there are things that we can glean from it and take from it that are very applicable even to our form of government today. So I'll tell you, he talks about 6 different types of government. And interestingly, as I mentioned, he says the best form of government, in his opinion, is the government where you have the fewer people involved directly in decision making is going to be the better. So monarchy was his favorite. Aristocracy was the second best, and then polity, which would be kind of like the government of many. But then he also believed that the worst form of government is a tyrant. And so when you have one good, virtuous leader, that's the best. But if that leader falls out of virtue, then you have the worst. So it's kind of like an all or nothing, and which leads to the question, well, how do you ensure that you have a virtuous leader, which he gets to that as well. But the reason he thinks that several people or many people are not the best form of government is that he said, if they all disagree with each other, you're going to have chaos, which we kind of see in our culture today. And then he says, well, if they all agree with each other, well, you might as well just have one person because they're all acting as one. And he compares it to a captain guiding a ship. He said it's better to have one captain guiding a ship to its end. And it's also very classic, what we call teleology, about all things being guided to an end. And of course, there's one God who's in charge of the entire world. So Thomas's politics and theology are going to go together, where he believes that one is better. Now, the next interesting thing is he says, how do we ensure that this monarch doesn't fall into tyranny? And he says that this is up to the people, because the more virtuous the people are, the better likely they are going to have a good leader, right? Which I think is something that we can learn even in our democratic republic today. Yeah. And he sees, this is a time of the divine right of kings, where, kings are basically appointed by God in a sense. And so it's the old kind of idea that you get what you deserve. If you are a immoral people, then you deserve to have an immoral leader. So he puts the onus of responsibility back on the people. Now, he also says a wise leader is going to despise glory, and he is going to want to live virtuously. Okay, so you see this kind of correlation between the people get what they deserve, but a virtuous people are going to generally have a virtuous leader. And so really everybody is involved in the kind of the leader. He says the duties of a king, he says it's been appointed to his position. This is an interesting comparison. He says the monarch, in his opinion, is to the kingdom what a soul is to the body and what God is to the world. So you figure you've got one soul that's operating your body, right? And so this again goes back to just how the one thing is the best. Now, this is where I find it very interesting, and this can be applicable to our government as well. he says that the regal government, or the monarch, the government should be ordained principally to eternal beatitude. So the way that the person rules has to always keep front in mind the eternal beatitude, the eternal glory of the people that he's ruling. And he says this monarch or this leader should make life suitable for the attainment of heavenly happiness. Mm-hmm. And he should command the things that lead to the happiness of heaven and forbid the contrary. Now, so anyway, so this is where you see this idea, which I think has been kind of lost, because we have this really kind of strict separation of church and state in our government, where nobody, although of course people do invoke God all the time in politics, but there's almost this unwritten rule that the two are to be separated. But Aquinas would have definitely not thought that was the case, that there was a divine element to leadership in the monarchy. But so those are some of the principles of what he thinks about government. But I want to get your thoughts, and then I'll tell you one other thing that I think is very key as far as the governed, and which applies to us today as well.
Well, it's very interesting because you mentioned that if the people aren't virtuous, then their leader is not going to be virtuous, and it's kind of the same similar case that we find today. A lot of these propositions out there, because our society is the kind of the culture of death now, like all these abortion propositions are now on the ballot. And I feel like some of these might pass, and it's all because of a lot of the society we have today that's been stripped away from, or Christianity has been stripped away from society. And so here we are, so it's very interesting that there's some similarities to this.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I talk to people even about, like today's election, and they'll say, well, a lot of people will say, well, it's in God's hands, which would be very similar to what Aquinas would have said, but in a very different form of government, that God is ordaining this. But then the people say, hey, we get what we deserve, if, especially in a democratic republic, if people vote in leaders that are, espousing immoral practices, well, there you go. You get what you deserve. And so, and that's what Aquinas is saying as well, but he's just saying it with a monarch rather than with some kind of democratic type of government. But the other interesting thing, I mentioned that he doesn't directly in the Summa talk a lot about government and leaders, but he has a big section in the Summa which has to do with law. And, the four kinds of law being eternal, divine, natural, and human. And the natural law, especially, I think, plays very important on a day like today, because Aquinas, and following Aristotle, would say that there's a natural law that we have within us that tells us in general ways what is right and wrong. We have general principles, right? That you don't harm the innocent, for example. And that would be one general principle. It doesn't get into the nitty gritty of, all the different laws. We don't know everything. We have to kind of work it out. But natural law will be a guiding principle for anybody under any kind of leadership. And a leader, of course, in Aquinas' day would have to follow natural law. And I think that's something that's been kind of lost in our culture today, because a lot of people seem to violate the very law that is built within them. And the other interesting thing is that, and this is why a lot of people don't like to hear any talk about natural law, is that natural law implies a creator, because the logical question is, well, if I have a law that is inside me naturally that I didn't give to myself, well, where did it come from? And so a natural law would always lead you to an understanding that God is guiding things, even in our very moral choices that we make. Because some things you can go against them, but you're going to be violating your conscience that's put in you, naturally. So the whole four kinds of law are very fundamental, and it's something that be taught, because I think somebody that understands the four kinds of law, especially natural law, will be a better citizen.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right on that, because if we don't follow these laws, then a lot of times when we see it all over the place now, like, this is my truth, and you should respect it. This is my truth, which a lot of these truths, quote unquote, they're not true at all. So here we are. It's crazy out there.
Yeah, yeah, and there's an interesting question in the Summa where St. Thomas Aquinas says, should everything, basically, I'm paraphrasing, but should everything immoral be illegal? And he says no, because he doesn't say this, but I think if that was the case, then we'd all be in jail, because he says, nobody can live absolutely virtuously unless you're, the Blessed Mother, right?
Sure.
And he says only the most grievous of crimes, like murder should be, and obviously there's going to be some kind of a spectrum there, but that's where human law comes in, and human law should always conform to natural law. And I love what I think Adam was saying earlier about this. Really takes a lot of discernment. In our culture today, we're very quick to react. And Adam was, saying earlier on the next right thing is that this really takes a lot of wisdom and prudence and prayer, and also reliance on God's guidance in order to come up with the best policies. And so I think that's we can kind of see the mess that we're in today, and the so much friction and so much tension in a day like this, is that perhaps we're not following natural law, and we're also not following the guidance of God through Holy Mother Church as much as we should as a country. So anyways, I pray for, best results today, but for everybody to keep their peace, regardless of what happens.
Yes. And avoid some of the social medias today, because I was just looking on a little bit earlier. There is very little wisdom and prudence happening right now, because people are reacting without taking the time to really focus and just be discerning on what they should and should not say. Because even on both ends of the spectrum, people are saying this is the end. It's like, okay, well, what can you, if that's the case, what do you do? Let's just focus and pray.
Yeah, I'm much more optimistic than that. I'm not a pessimist. I think I'm actually excited to see what happens today. But
yeah, it'll be exciting.
Anyways, God is in control. But thanks, Keith. That's Good to be with you.
As always, Dave, we can catch you every single Tuesday on Morning Joy, but also on Fridays, we can find you on Back to the Father, 1 p.m. Central on GRN Online YouTube. So make sure to put that on your calendar. And that is it for this hour of Morning Joy. So if maybe you're going to the polling place, maybe it's one of those local churches, a school, to drop off your early ballot, or maybe you're actually going into votes, we will certainly keep you in our prayers. Otherwise, we've got a whole nother hour coming up with Morning Joy, where truth matters. We're talking with Chris Faddis, talking about health sharing. What does that mean? And so much more. So stay tuned right after this quick break here on Morning Joy, where truth matters.
This has been Morning Joy, where truth matters, hosted by Keith Downey. Take some joy with you today. Visit grnonline.com/joy to listen again, share a segment, or answer the question of the day. That's grnonline.com/joy.